Let me tell you what they don't mention in the fairy tales about mate bonds. They don't tell you that when your mate cheats, the bond doesn't just break, it rots. The mate mark on your skin turns black, corruption spreading through your body like poison ink. You've got maybe a week before your own biology kills you. The only cure, get marked by someone else. Fast. Funny how they leave that part out of the fairy tales. So picture this. You come home early to surprise your mate for your 2-year anniversary. You're carrying his favorite whiskey, practicing what you'll say. Instead, you find him tangled in bed with the beta's daughter, in sheets you washed that morning. You watch the mate mark on your collarbone start to darken like a bruise blooming in fast forward. Within hours, you're burning up with fever, black veins crawling up your neck like dark fingers. The pack healer takes one look and tells you to run. Find someone, anyone, willing to replace the bond before it's too late. You stumble into a roadside inn in neutral territory, half delirious, and there's this stranger in the corner booth. Silver eyes that seem to look straight through you. Dark hair, looks like he's carrying the weight of the entire world on his shoulders. You beg him, literally beg this man whose name you don't even know, to save your life by marking you. He looks at you like he understands exactly what desperation feels like, and he says okay. 3 days later, you wake up in a palace. Those same silver eyes are staring at you, but now he's wearing a crown. And he asks the question that's about to unravel everything. Did you know who I was? I'm Rhea Barton, and I'm about to tell you how I accidentally became the most controversial queen in werewolf history, and how I learned that sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you is actually the beginning of something real. Before we start fully, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Now, let's begin. The forest path home had never felt shorter. Rhea adjusted the pack on her shoulders, the bottle of Thornwood whiskey, Cassius's favorite, stupidly expensive, clinking against the dried herbs she'd gathered from the eastern territories. 3 days felt like forever when you were away from your mate. The bond hummed quietly in her chest, that constant awareness of him somewhere in the distance, like a compass always pointing home. She practiced under her breath as she walked. Happy anniversary. I know it's early, but I couldn't wait another day. Too eager. Surprise, I missed you. Too simple. Maybe she'd just kiss him and let the whiskey speak for itself. The cottage came into view through the trees, smoke rising from the chimney. He was home. Good. The bond felt warm, content. Everything was fine. She pushed open the door quietly, wanting to surprise him. The main room was empty, but she heard sounds from upstairs. Movement. She smiled, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Cassius, you won't believe what I found in the eastern. The bedroom door creaked open under her hand. Time didn't stop. That's the thing nobody tells you. Time keeps moving, your heart keeps beating, the world keeps turning while everything inside you shatters. Cassius was in their bed, with Imani Harper tangled in sheets Rhea had washed 3 days ago before leaving. Imani's burnt orange eyes met Rhea's over Cassius's shoulder, not shocked, not apologetic, something between triumph and pity. Cassius turned. His face went white then red. Guilt, yes, but underneath it something worse, relief. The mate mark on Rhea's collarbone began to burn. She pressed her hand to it instinctively, and that's when she felt it, the bond fracturing. Not cleanly like a broken bone, messily like tearing flesh. The mark under her palm went hot, then cold, then began to spread. She looked down and watched black veins spider out from the golden mark, corrupting it like ink dropped in water. Rhea, Cassius started, climbing out of bed, reaching for his pants. She couldn't speak. The pain was radiating from her chest now, like her heart was trying to beat around shattered glass. The mark continued darkening, black veins crawling up her neck. I can explain, Cassius said, and he actually sounded like he believed it. Imani sat up, completely unbothered by her nakedness, wrapping the sheet around herself. Cassius, don't. This isn't. We didn't mean for you to find out like this. Find out? Rhea's voice came out broken, barely recognizable. The burning was spreading through her bloodstream now. This was bad. This was really bad. The bond's just biology, Cassius was saying, and he wasn't even talking to her anymore. He was looking at Imani. What we have is choice. Imani's expression softened looking at him. Actual affection. Rhea's sweet, but she's ordinary. You're going to be a beta female. You understand power. Ordinary. The word hit harder than the corrupting bond, somehow. 2 years. 2 years of making herself smaller, quieter, more convenient, trying to be enough. The fever spiked. Rhea grabbed the doorframe as her vision swam. The black veins had reached her jawline now. She could feel them, cold threads of poison working through her system. Rhea, wait. Cassius took a step toward her. She ran. Down the stairs, out the door into the forest. Behind her, Cassius called her name, but weakly. He didn't follow. Of course he didn't follow. The trees blurred around her. She didn't know where she was going, only away. The pack bond tugged at her, demanding she stay, but the mate bond was louder, screaming, dying, taking her with it. Her vision tunneled. The mark on her collarbone felt like it was burning through to bone. She pressed her hand against a tree trunk, trying to breathe through the waves of nausea. She needed help, fast. The only thought crystal clear through the fever and heartbreak. If she didn't sever this bond in the next few days, it would kill her. Rhea pushed away from the tree and kept running. Rhea didn't remember most of the journey to Freya's cottage. Just fragments, stumbling over roots, the sunset turning everything orange and wrong, her own breathing too loud in her ears. The cottage appeared through the trees like something out of a fever dream. Smoke curled from the chimney. Herbs hung drying from the eaves. Rhea hit the door with her shoulder more than knocked. It opened before she could fall through it. Well, Freya said, taking in Rhea's appearance with sharp gray eyes. That's a corrupting bond if I've ever seen one. Get inside before you collapse on my doorstep. The interior was exactly what you'd expect from a rogue healer. Shelves crammed with bottles and jars, bundles of dried plants hanging from every available beam, a fire crackling in the hearth. It smelled like medicine and earth. Freya guided Rhea to a chair and immediately began her examination. Fingers checking the pulse in Rhea's wrist, pulling down her collar to examine the blackened mate mark, peering into her eyes. How long? Freya asked. 6 hours, maybe 7. Rhea's voice sounded distant to her own ears. Look at me. Freya's thumb pulled down Rhea's lower eyelid. Bloodshot, fever. Yes. Nausea. Constantly. Freya made a considering sound, then crossed to her shelves. Your body thinks it's dying because half of it is. The bond's like shared blood. When one half turns toxic, it poisons everything. Can you fix it? The words came out smaller than Rhea intended. Fix, no. Buy you time? Yes. Freya was crushing something in a mortar, the grinding sound steady and somehow comforting. But we need to be clear about what's happening here. Your mate bond is corrupting because your mate betrayed the bond. His choice fractured it. Now the broken pieces are poisoning your system. She poured boiling water over the crushed herbs, and the smell made Rhea's stomach turn. Drink this. It tastes like death, but it'll slow the spread. You've got 4 days, maybe 5 if you're lucky. Rhea took the cup with shaking hands. The liquid was dark and oily. It tasted like ash and copper and something bitter that coated her tongue. She forced it down. What happens in 5 days? Your organs start shutting down. Heart first, usually, sometimes the brain. Freya said it the way you'd discuss the weather. The only cure is a new bond. Someone else marks you, creates a new connection, burns out the old one. And then I'm fine. Then you're alive. Whether that's fine is up to you. Freya sat across from her. But understand, whoever marks you becomes your mate, permanently. The bond isn't some temporary fix you can undo later. You'll be bound to them for life. Rhea stared at the empty cup in her hands. Life, she'd take it. Is Cassius going through this too? Freya's expression was answer enough, but she said it anyway. He initiated the betrayal. The bond might hurt him, but it won't kill him. Life's not fair. Of course he got to betray her and survive while she got to die from his choices. You could try going back and begging him to recommit to the bond, Freya said, completely deadpan. Rhea's head snapped up, horror written across her face. That's what I thought. You've got better survival instincts than most. Freya pulled out a piece of worn paper and began writing. There are wolves who help in situations like this. Discreet. Live on the margins, don't ask questions. I'm giving you 3 names. They frequent the crossroads, neutral ground, 2 days west. She handed Rhea the list. The names meant nothing to her. Choose carefully, Freya said. Not the first desperate option that presents itself. Whoever marks you, you'll be bound to them forever. Pick someone you could survive being bound to. Rhea folded the paper with numb fingers. 4 days to find a stranger willing to save her life and become her mate. 4 days to choose someone she could survive. What if none of them will help me? Freya's expression softened slightly. Then you find someone else who will. You're resourceful, you made it here, didn't you? The world's full of wolves, girl. One of them will say yes. She pressed a small pouch into Rhea's hand. More suppressants. Take one every 12 hours. Don't take more than that or you'll poison yourself in a different way. Rhea stood on shaking legs. The fever had backed off slightly, but she could still feel the corruption spreading, just slower now. 4 days. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Survive first. Then you can thank me. Rhea stepped back into the evening air. The sky was darkening, stars beginning to appear. 2 days to the crossroads, 4 days to live. She started walking west. 2 days of walking blurred together into one long fever dream. Rhea took the suppressants exactly as Freya instructed, but they only dulled the edge. The black veins continued their crawl up her neck, reaching her jaw by the second morning. Her reflection in a stream showed eyes too bright, skin too pale, lips cracked from fever. The crossroads appeared at dusk on the second day, a squat building with weathered wood and shuttered windows that glowed with warm lamplight. The sign hanging above the door showed 2 paths crossing, paint faded and peeling. Neutral ground. The kind of place where pack allegiances didn't matter, where wolves came to disappear for a while or conduct business they didn't want witnessed. The kind of place where questions weren't asked. Rhea pushed through the door. The interior was exactly what she expected. Low ceiling, smoke hanging in the air, tables filled with rough-looking wolves nursing drinks and keeping to themselves. Conversations stopped when she entered, eyes assessing her for threats or opportunities, then dismissing her. She was nobody. Good. The bartender was cleaning a glass that looked like it had never been clean. Rhea approached, pulling out Freya's list with trembling fingers. I'm looking for someone, Darius, or maybe Jenna. The bartender glanced at the names, sympathy flickering across his weathered face. Darius left last week, headed north. Jenna doesn't do that kind of work anymore. What about Marcus? Marcus is dead, 3 months now. Of course. Rhea's fingers tightened on the bar edge, knuckles white. 4 days had become 3, and she had no options left. She caught her reflection in the grimy mirror behind the bar. The black veins had spread further, dark spiderwebs reaching toward her ear. Her eyes looked feverish and desperate. She looked like someone who was dying. Because she was. The room tilted slightly. Rhea gripped the bar harder, forcing herself to breathe. There had to be someone, anyone. That's when she noticed him. Corner booth, hood pulled up, but silver eyes catching the lamplight like coins at the bottom of a well. He'd been watching her conversation with the bartender. Something about him felt different, the way he sat, the careful stillness, the sense of barely contained energy. Desperation made her bold, or stupid, probably both. Rhea walked to his table. Up close, she could see more, dark hair escaping the hood, strong jaw, the kind of face that was used to being obeyed. He didn't look up as she approached, just took a slow sip of whatever amber liquid was in his glass. I need help. Everyone in this place needs help. His voice was low, rough. He still didn't look at her. What makes you special? I'm dying, and I think you're the only person in this room who might give a damn. That got his attention. Silver eyes lifted to meet hers, and for a moment the intensity of his gaze made her forget the fever. He studied her like she was a problem to be solved, taking in the corrupted mate mark, the black veins, the desperate set of her shoulders. Sit down before you fall down. Rhea slid into the booth across from him, grateful to be off her feet. Show me, he gestured to her neck. She pulled her collar aside, revealing the blackened mate mark and the corruption spreading from it. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those silver eyes. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. You've been marked before, recently betrayed, the bonds corrupting. Statement, not question. How did you? I know what a dying bond looks like. He leaned back, shadows falling across his face. How long? 3 days, maybe less. He made a considering sound, fingers tapping against his glass. And you want me to mark you, replace the bond? I want someone to mark me. You're just the only person left on my list who's not dead, gone, or retired. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. Honesty, that's refreshing. He studied her for another long moment. You understand what you're asking? This isn't temporary. Whoever marks you becomes your mate, permanently. I understand. Do you? The intensity was back. You'll be bound to a stranger for the rest of your life. You don't know me. Don't know what kind of wolf I am, what I've done, what I'm capable of. I know you're still sitting here listening instead of telling me to leave. That's enough. He was quiet for so long Rhea thought he'd refuse. Then he drained his glass and set it down with careful precision. I help you, but there are conditions. You don't ask my name, my pack, or anything about me. After tonight, you forget this happened. You go your way, I go mine. Understood. Strange terms, but Rhea was in no position to negotiate. Understood. He stood, and she realized he was taller than she'd thought, broader. Dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with aggression and everything to do with control. Come on then, let's save your life. Zane led her through a back door, down a narrow passage, and into a courtyard Rhea suspected most patrons didn't know existed. Overgrown and abandoned, stone walls covered in ivy that had long since taken over. The moon hung full overhead, washing everything in silver light. It was beautiful in a forgotten way. Here, Zane gestured to a stone bench. The walls would give them privacy, and the moonlight was bright enough to see by. He turned to face her, and for the first time pushed back his hood. Rhea's breath caught, not from attraction, though he was striking, but from the intensity of him fully revealed. Younger than she'd expected, maybe late 20s, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and those silver eyes that seemed to see straight through pretense. A scar cut through his left eyebrow. He looked like someone who'd made hard choices and survived them. Last chance to change your mind, he said quietly. I already changed my mind about dying. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition of the kind of stubbornness that kept you alive when you shouldn't be. Sit. He waited until she was settled on the bench, then knelt in front of her so they were eye level. I need access to your neck. The process will hurt. The old bond won't let go easily. You need to stay conscious through it. Can you do that? Do I have a choice? There's always a choice, but if you pass out, it could kill you. Rhea tilted her head, exposing the corrupted mate mark and her throat. Vulnerable, trusting a stranger with her life because she had no other option. I'll stay conscious. His hand came up to her jaw, gentle despite the calluses, turning her head slightly to better access the mark. The touch was clinical, but there was care in it. The old mark will burn away first, then the new bond will form. It's going to feel like dying and being reborn at the same time. Sounds terrible. It is. His thumb brushed her pulse point, checking her heartbeat. Ready. She nodded, not trusting her voice. The night-blooming flowers nearby released their scent, sweet and heavy. The stone bench was still warm from the day's sun. Rhea focused on these things as Zane leaned closer, his breath warm against her neck. When his teeth pierced her skin, the world exploded into sensation. The old mate mark ignited like he'd poured oil on a flame. Rhea gasped, her hands flying up to grip Zane's shoulders as burning pain radiated from her collarbone. The black veins lit up like lightning under her skin, fighting back, clinging to her system. She tasted copper. Her own heartbeat thundered in her ears. Then the tearing started, the old bond ripping away. Phantom pain crashed through her. Finding Cassius with a Manny, hearing him call her ordinary, every moment she'd made herself smaller to fit into his life. The bond threw it all at her like a dying animal fighting for survival. Stay with me. Zane's voice cut through the chaos, steady and sure. His hand was at the back of her neck, supporting her. Breathe, it's almost over. She focused on his voice, used it like an anchor. The old bond screamed as it burned away, the black veins receding like poison being drawn from a wound. The corrupted mark turned to ash. Then came the fire. The new bond forming felt like lightning in her veins, white-hot and electric. Where the old bond had been warm and familiar, this was intense, almost overwhelming. It carved through her system, claiming space, burning out the last traces of corruption. Different, the old bond had felt like wearing someone else's coat, comfortable but never quite fitting. This felt like her skin had finally learned to breathe. The new mark formed on her collarbone, silver instead of gold, intricate and gleaming. The pain peaked, then crashed, leaving her gasping. "There," Zane pulled back, steadying her as she swayed. "You did it. Stay awake a little longer." But the fever was finally breaking, and exhaustion hit like a physical blow. Rhea's vision tunneled, the courtyard spinning. The last thing she registered was Zane's arms catching her as she fell, his quiet curse, and the feeling of being lifted. Then darkness took her under. She woke to morning light, streaming through a window and silence. Rhea was in a small room, clean sheets, simple furniture, the kind of space the crossroads rented by the night. She sat up slowly, testing her body. The fever was gone. The nausea was gone. She pulled her collar aside and looked down. The new mate mark gleamed silver on her collarbone, fully formed and beautiful. No black veins, no corruption, just the intricate pattern of a bond that had saved her life. On the table beside the bed sat a small stack of gold coins and a note in precise handwriting. "Heal, forget." Rhea touched the mark, then the note. The stranger who'd saved her was gone. She didn't know his name, his pack, anything about him except that he'd given her a second chance at living. The new bond hummed quietly in her chest, present but not intrusive, steady. She pocketed the coins, left the note on the table, and walked out into her new life. Rhea spent an hour that morning just staring at the new mate mark in the room's small, cracked mirror. Silver, not the traditional gold that marked most bonded pairs, but pure silver that caught the light like moonlit water. The pattern was intricate, more detailed than her old mark had been, with delicate lines that seemed to shift slightly when she moved. Beautiful, strange. Great, even her emergency mate bond was weird. She pressed her fingers to it experimentally. No pain, no fever, no black veins spreading like poison, just smooth skin and the faint hum of the bond in her chest. She explored that hum carefully, the way you'd test ice to see if it would hold your weight. The old bond with Cassius had been warm, constant, like background noise she'd grown so used to she stopped noticing. This was different, quieter, but underneath the quiet was a sense of vastness she didn't understand, like looking at an ocean and knowing there were depths you couldn't see. Whoever he was, her mysterious savior, he was powerful. She could feel it in the bond. Rhea packed her few belongings and headed downstairs. The common room was mostly empty, just a few wolves nursing morning drinks and nursing hangovers. The bartender from last night was wiping down tables. "The man from last night," Rhea said, keeping her voice low. "The one in the corner booth, is he still here?" The bartender didn't even look up. "Oh, him, left before dawn, always does." "You know him?" "Not really. Comes through maybe twice a year, keeps to himself, generous tipper." He shrugged. "That's all I know, that's all anyone knows." "No name, no pack, nothing, just like he demanded." Rhea touched the coins in her pocket and headed west. 3 days of walking through forests that slowly changed from familiar to foreign. She slept rough the first 2 nights, finding shelter under rock overhangs, eating the dried rations she'd bought with some of the gold. On the 3rd day, she reached a border town, small, quiet, the kind of place where people came to disappear. Perfect. The hostel was run by an older she-wolf who took one look at Rhea's road-worn appearance and offered her work in exchange for room and board. Rhea accepted gratefully. Washing dishes and chopping vegetables was honest work, and it kept her hands busy while her mind wandered. She tried to feel guilty about the bond. Really, she did. Some stranger was now permanently tied to her because she'd begged him to save her life. But every time she tried to muster regret, she just felt relieved to be alive. "Sorry, mysterious stranger, for trapping you into saving my life. She'd think it while scrubbing pots, almost making herself laugh. Though technically, he'd agreed. He could have said no. The bond remained quiet, that steady hum she was getting used to. Sometimes she'd feel ripples across it, emotions that weren't hers. Exhaustion, frustration. Once, something that felt like amusement, but mostly it was peaceful. For the first time in months, Rhea slept dreamlessly. No nightmares about Cassius. No waking up in a cold sweat, reaching for a bond that was trying to kill her. Just deep, healing sleep. 3 days of peace. Then the royal guards arrived. Rhea was in the kitchen, elbow-deep in dishwater, when she heard the commotion in the common room. Horses outside, armored footsteps. The kind of silence that falls when authority walks into a room. She dried her hands and peered through the doorway. 4 guards in formal dress, polished armor, royal blue cloaks with gold trim, swords at their hips. They weren't here for a casual visit. The lead guard, broad-shouldered with serious eyes, was speaking to the hostile owner. "We're looking for Rhea Barton." The owner's eyes found Rhea in the doorway. That's her. Every eye in the common room turned to stare. Rhea stepped out of the kitchen slowly, heart beginning to pound. What could royal guards possibly want with her? The lead guard assessed her with a single glance, his gaze catching on her neck. His expression shifted, surprise, then something like concern. "Rhea Barton." "Yes." "You're summoned to the capital, by order of King Zane Thorn." The room went completely silent. Rhea felt the blood drain from her face. "Who's King Zane Thorn?" The guard's eyebrows rose. He exchanged a glance with his companions, clearly thrown. "The Alpha King, and apparently..." He gestured to her neck, to the silver mate mark gleaming there. His mate. The floor tilted. No, that wasn't possible. The stranger in the tavern had been just that, a stranger. Rough clothes, drinking alone, helping her out of what, pity? Kindness. He couldn't have been. But the guard was still talking, and the pieces were falling into horrifying place. "The king requests your immediate presence. We have horses ready. We leave within the hour." Rhea's hand flew to the mate mark, pressing against it like she could somehow verify what he was saying through touch alone. Across the bond, she felt something shift. Recognition. Resignation. Oh gods. What had she done? "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know who he was." The guard's expression softened slightly. "That's what he said you'd say. Pack your things, Miss Barton. It's a 4-day ride to the capital." Around her, the other hostile guests were whispering, staring, backing away like she'd suddenly become dangerous. The owner looked terrified she'd done something wrong by giving Rhea work. Rhea stood frozen in the middle of the common room, the weight of what had happened finally crashing down on her. She'd accidentally bonded herself to the Alpha King. The carriage was nicer than anything Rhea had ever ridden in, and she hated every moment of it. 4 days trapped in a moving box with 2 royal guards who took turns watching her like she might sprout claws and attack at any moment. The sympathetic one was called Shepherd, older, weathered face, kind eyes that kept looking at her with something like pity. The suspicious one was Cairo, younger, sharper, with the kind of scrutiny that made her feel like a liar even when she was telling the truth. They didn't chain her. That was something, at least. "So," Rhea said on the second day, because the silence was suffocating and she needed answers. "King Zane Thorn." Shepherd glanced at Cairo, some silent communication passing between them. Then he nodded. "What do you want to know?" "Anything, everything. I didn't even know his name 3 days ago." Cairo made a skeptical sound. Shepherd shot him a look. "The king's been ruling for 5 years," Shepherd said carefully. "Took the crown young after his father's death. He's unwed under pressure from the council to marry for alliances. He's strong, fair, careful." Careful, that word hung in the air like a warning. Careful about what? Another glance between the guards. This time it was Cairo who spoke, his voice flat. "Lady Cameron, his previous companion. She tried to poison him 6 months ago." Rhea's stomach dropped. "What?" "She was a noble's daughter," Shepherd continued, gentler than Cairo. "Seemed genuine. Spent a year at court, close to the king. Turned out she was working with her family to destabilize the crown. Put nightshade in his wine during a private dinner. He survived, obviously." Barely, he's been careful since then. Can't blame him for wondering if you knew who he was. Understanding crashed over her. Zane had helped her despite thinking she might be another Cameron, another schemer, another pretty trap. Convenient story, though, Cairo said, not bothering to hide his suspicion. Dying mate Bond, mysterious stranger in a tavern, happens to be the king. Cairo. I'm just saying what the court's going to say. He leaned forward, studying Rhea. You expect us to believe you didn't recognize him. The Alpha King travels sometimes, sure, but his face isn't exactly unknown. I was dying, Rhea said flatly. I wasn't exactly memorizing royal portraits. How convenient that your mate betrayed you right when the king happened to be passing through neutral territory. Rhea's hands clenched in her lap. You think I orchestrated my own mate cheating on me? That I chose to have a corrupting Bond try to kill me? That I somehow knew the king would be at that specific tavern on that specific night? I think people do desperate things for power. I was desperate to not die, that's it. Shepard put a hand on Cairo's arm. Enough, we're here to escort, not interrogate. They rode in tense silence after that. Rhea stared out the window, watching the landscape change from wild forest to cultivated fields to roads that actually had paving stones. More people, more buildings, the kingdom growing denser as they approached its heart. On the fourth day, she saw the capital. It rose from the valley like something out of a story. Massive walls of pale stone, towers reaching toward the sky, thousands of buildings cascading down the hillside toward a river that cut through the city's center. Banners flew from every tower, gold and blue snapping in the wind. Gods, Rhea breathed. First time seeing the capital, Shepard asked, not unkindly. First time seeing anything bigger than a village. The city swallowed them. Crowds parted for the royal carriage, people bowing, staring, whispering. Rhea shrank back from the window. This wasn't her world. These weren't her people. Then the palace came into view, and the city seemed small by comparison. Towering white stone, dozens of towers, golden banners everywhere, guards stationed at every entrance. Beautiful, massive, utterly foreign. The kind of place where people like Rhea scrubbed floors, not walked through the front door. But they didn't take her to the servants' entrance. They took her through the main gate, past more guards, into corridors with vaulted ceilings and tapestries worth more than everything she'd ever owned combined. This way, Shepard said gently. They walked for what felt like miles. Rhea's legs ached from 4 days in the carriage. Her simple traveling clothes felt threadbare and dirty against the palace's opulence, and the mate bond in her chest was pulling tighter with every step. He was close. She could feel him. They stopped outside an ornate door. Shepard knocked, waited for the response, then pushed it open. Miss Barton, Your Majesty. The study was smaller than she expected. Books lining the walls, a desk covered in papers, windows overlooking gardens she couldn't fully see. And standing with his back to the door, looking out those windows, was the stranger from the tavern. Except he wasn't a stranger. He was wearing fine clothes now, his dark hair neatly styled, and when he turned around, those silver eyes were cold in a way they hadn't been in the courtyard. King Zane Thorne, Alpha King, her mate. Leave us, Zane said quietly. The guards bowed and retreated. The door closed with a soft click that felt like a cell locking. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. The mate bond flickered between them, his suspicion, her exhaustion, both their frustration. Tell me the truth, Zane said, and his voice was different from the courtyard. Harder, more controlled. Did you know who I was? I didn't even know your name. You expect me to believe that. I don't care what you believe. The words came out sharper than she intended, but Rhea was too tired to soften them. I was dying. You were the only person who agreed to help. That's the truth. He studied her, and she watched him trying to find the lie, trying to see the scheme. This complicates everything, he said finally. Rhea laughed, bitter and exhausted. I'm sorry I didn't die in a ditch somewhere instead. That would have been much more convenient for you. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Then something softer, recognition of her exhaustion, her frustration, the absolute absurdity of their situation. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? Rhea met his eyes. I can feel your suspicion across the bond. You think I'm another Cameron, another trap. I can't prove I'm not, and you can't afford to believe me. So what now? The rooms they gave Rhea were beautiful in the way. A gilded cage is beautiful. High ceilings, silk curtains, a bed large enough to sleep 5 people, windows overlooking gardens she wasn't sure she was allowed to walk in. Everything was cream and gold and carefully coordinated. Everything was also in the East Wing, far from the royal apartments, isolated from the main court. She understood the message. "You'll need help dressing for dinner," said the servant who'd been assigned to her, Adalyn, sharp-eyed and practical, with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Court has standards. I can dress myself." "Not for this, you can't." Adalyn pulled out a gown that looked like someone had fought a chandelier and lost. "Welcome to palace life." Rhea stared at the dress. "So we're just wearing chandeliers as dresses." Adalyn's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Half the court thinks you're a genius schemer who trapped the king. The other half thinks you're an idiot who got lucky. Either way, they don't like you. Might as well look the part." The first council dinner was exactly as terrible as Rhea expected. She was seated near the head table, but not at it, close enough to be displayed, far enough to be dismissed. The council members were exactly what she'd imagined, polished, powerful, looking at her like something they'd found on their shoe. Duke Holden, silver-haired and calculating, spoke first. "Tell us, Miss Barton, what did your father do?" The table went quiet. Even the servants stopped pouring wine. "I don't know," Rhea said evenly. "I never met him." The silence stretched, uncomfortable, damning. "And your mother?" Duchess Everly asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Dead when I was young." "How unfortunate." Zane sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. He didn't defend her, but he didn't join the Inquisition either. Just watched, those silver eyes giving nothing away. Rhea made it through 3 courses before excusing herself. The weeks that followed blurred together into a parade of hostile dinners, suspicious glances, and whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. Adalyn became her only real ally, offering pragmatic advice while helping Rhea navigate the maze of court politics. Don't bother trying to make friends with Duchess Everly. She wanted her daughter to marry the king. You're in her way. Should I be worried? Only if your food starts tasting funny. Adalyn adjusted Rhea's dress for yet another formal dinner. Duke Holden's more subtle. He'll undermine you politically. And Lady Miranda just enjoys drama, so she'll spread whatever rumor is most entertaining. What do they say about me? That you seduced the king, that the bond isn't real, that he'll annul it within a month. Adalyn met her eyes in the mirror. That you're common-born trash who doesn't belong here. They're not wrong about the last part. Belonging isn't about blood, it's about refusing to leave. Adalyn pinned the final section of Rhea's hair. Which fork will you use tonight? The salad fork for salad, the dinner fork for dinner. Good, and if you stab Duke Holden, make sure it's at least the salad fork. This time, Adalyn actually smiled. Rhea rarely saw Zane outside formal events. When she did, he was always surrounded by advisors, guards, petitioners, the machinery of ruling that never seemed to stop. But sometimes she'd catch him watching her across a crowded room, his expression unreadable. The mate bond hummed between them constantly now that they were close. She could feel his exhaustion, the weight of constant vigilance, moments of frustration that weren't about her but bled through anyway. Sometimes late at night, when she couldn't sleep, she'd feel him awake too, both of them alone in their separate parts of the palace. 3 weeks in, Rhea discovered the palace library. It was late, well past midnight, and she couldn't stand her beautiful rooms for another moment. The library was massive, 3 stories of books spiraling up into darkness, ladders on rails, reading nooks tucked into corners. She was curled in one of those nooks, finally breathing freely, when she heard footsteps. Zane appeared around a shelf, stopping short when he saw her. He was dressed casually, or what passed for casual when you were a king, and looked as surprised as she felt. "I didn't think anyone else used the library this late," he said. "I'll leave." "Don't." He moved to a nearby shelf, studying the spines with practiced ease. "I come here when I need to think." They existed in awkward silence for several minutes, Rhea pretending to read, Zane pretending to browse. Then he spoke, quietly. "What are you reading?" She showed him the cover, a history of the Northern Territories. "Trying to understand where you've ended up." "Trying to understand anything." Rhea closed the book. "Do you ever feel like everyone else learned the rules before you got here, and you're just pretending you know what's happening?" Something shifted in his expression. "Every day." "You're the king." "Exactly. Every decision affects thousands of people. Every mistake is public. Every moment is watched." He pulled a book from the shelf, not looking at her. "Sometimes I come here because books don't expect anything from me." It was the most honest thing he'd said to her since the courtyard. "They hate me," Rhea said quietly. "Your court. They're suspicious of you. There's a difference." "Is there?" Zane turned to face her fully then, and in the dim library light, he looked younger, tired. "I don't regret marking you, but I also don't know how to fix this situation. The court expects explanations I can't give. The council demands I strengthen alliances through marriage, and instead I'm bonded to someone they see as common-born trash who doesn't belong here." His jaw tightened. "I was going to say someone they don't understand." "Same thing." He studied her for a long moment, and Rhea felt the mate bond flicker between them. His conflict, her resignation, both their exhaustion. "I should go," he said abruptly, stepping back. "It's late." And just like that, the moment shattered. After a particularly brutal state dinner, where Duke Holden had loudly discussed the importance of proper bloodlines, while staring at her, Rhea found Zane in one of the palace corridors. "If you want me gone, just say it." He turned, clearly not expecting her to confront him. "It's not that simple." "Everything is simple. You just don't like the simple answer." "The simple answer," Zane said, voice tight with frustration, "is that I marked you and I don't regret it. But that doesn't fix the mess we're in. The court is watching. The council is circling. And I don't know how to protect you from them without making everything worse." Rhea stared at him. "I don't need protection. I need to know if I'm staying or leaving." "Stay," he said quietly. "Please." The council meeting had been particularly vicious. Duke Holden had spent 20 minutes explaining, in excruciating detail, why the king should remedy his youthful mistake by annulling the bond and marrying properly. His daughter Catilia had sat beside him, blushing prettily at all the right moments, while the rest of the council nodded along like this was perfectly reasonable. Rhea had sat through it because leaving would have been seen as weakness, but the moment she was dismissed, she fled to the farthest corner of the palace gardens she could find. The overgrown section, the part that looked like gardeners had forgotten it existed. Wild roses climbed crumbling stone walls, jasmine spilled over abandoned trellises, and a weathered bench sat hidden beneath a canopy of leaves. She sat there trying very hard not to cry, because crying would mean they'd won. "They're wrong about you." Rhea's head snapped up. Zane stood at the edge of the small clearing, still in his formal council clothes, looking as exhausted as she felt. "How did you find me?" "The bond," he gestured vaguely to his chest. "I could feel you out here, upset." "I'm fine." "You're not." He moved closer, and the evening light caught in his silver eyes, turning them almost golden. What Holden said in there was true. Rhea laughed, bitter and tired. "I trapped you, maybe not on purpose, but the result is the same. You're stuck with me and your court hates it, and I can't even argue they're wrong because they're not." Zane sat beside her on the bench, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "You were dying. I made a choice. Don't take that away from me." "A choice you wouldn't have made if you'd known who I was, or who you were, or," she pressed her hands to her face, "this is such a mess." "Yes," he agreed quietly, "it is." They sat in silence for a moment. The evening air was cooling, carrying the scent of jasmine. Golden light filtered through the leaves, slowly fading to blue as sunset approached. "I spent 2 years trying to be enough for Cassius," Rhea said finally, "making myself smaller, quieter, more convenient, and it was never enough. He wanted someone ambitious, someone who understood power." She looked down at her hands. "Someone not me." "Cameron understood power," Zane said. "She understood it so well she tried to use it to kill me." His hand rubbed absently at his chest, where Rhea knew the poison had nearly stopped his heart. I trusted her, completely, and she looked me in the eye and poured nightshade in my wine. I'm not her. I know. He turned to face her fully. That's what terrifies me, because when I see you across a room, something in me settles, and I don't know what to do with that. Rhea's breath caught. Zane. You make me want to trust again, to believe someone could look at me and see just me, not the crown, not the power, not what they can gain. His hand came up, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. But I don't know how to protect you from the court if I let myself. She kissed him, tentative at first, questioning, giving him every chance to pull away. But he didn't pull away. His hand curved around the back of her neck, deepening the kiss, and suddenly it wasn't tentative anymore. It was urgent and desperate, and two people who'd been holding back finally letting go. The mate bond flared between them like lightning, not just physical attraction but emotional recognition. This was what a real bond felt like. Not Cassius's warmth that had always felt slightly off, but this fierce, steady certainty. Zane pulled back just enough to rest his forehead against hers, both of them breathing hard. This is still a mess, he said. I know. The court will fight this. I know. But I don't want to let you go. Then don't. He kissed her again, softer this time, like sealing a promise. The garden around them faded, just the two of them, the cooling air, the taste of possibility. Your Majesty. They broke apart. Shepard stood at the edge of the clearing, looking acutely uncomfortable at having interrupted. This better be important, Zane said, but there was no real anger in it. The Regional Alpha Summit. It's being moved up. The delegations will arrive within 3 days. Shepard's eyes flicked to Rhea, apologetic. Alpha Cassius Mueller and Beta Hezekiah Harper are confirmed to attend. The world came crashing back. Zane's expression shuddered, the king's mask sliding back into place. 3 days? That's not much time. No, Your Majesty. Rhea felt cold despite the warm evening. Cassius will be here, and Beta Hezekiah. Yes, Zane stood, offering her his hand. She took it and he pulled her to her feet. Hezekiah will try something. He's too calculating not to. What will you do? Protect you, he squeezed her hand. I don't know how yet, but I will. Let him try, Rhea said quietly, and she was surprised to find she meant it. 3 weeks of hostile court had burned away the part of her that apologized for existing. I'm still here, aren't I? I'm harder to get rid of than they think. Zane's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. Yes, you are. Shepard cleared his throat. The council is requesting your presence, Your Majesty. Preparations for the summit. Of course they are. Zane turned back to Rhea, and for just a moment the mask dropped again. We'll figure this out, together. Together, she agreed. He left with Shepard, but before disappearing around the corner, he looked back at her once, promise and worry written equally across his face. Rhea stood alone in the garden as darkness settled around her. 3 days until Cassius arrived. 3 days until whatever Hezekiah had planned came to light. She touched her lips, still feeling the kiss, the bond humming steadily in her chest. Let them come. She'd survived a dying bond in a hostile court. She could survive this too. Rhea watched from a third-floor window as the delegations arrived. 7 regional alphas, each with their entourages, advisors, guards, families. The palace courtyard filled with carriages bearing different pack sigils, servants rushing to manage luggage, the controlled chaos of hosting powerful wolves who all wanted to be treated as most important. She wasn't looking for Cassius. She told herself she wasn't looking for him. But when his carriage arrived, bearing the mountain pine sigil of the Northern Territories, her breath caught anyway. He stepped out first, and Rhea barely recognized him. Thinner, almost gaunt, moving carefully like everything hurt. The mate mark on his neck was visible even from this distance, twisted and dark, corruption spreading just like hers had. He was suffering too. Good, she thought, then immediately felt guilty for thinking it. Beta Hezekiah emerged next, imposing, silver-haired, carrying himself with the kind of authority that made people step aside. Every inch a politician, every movement calculated. He scanned the courtyard like he was already planning 3 moves ahead. Then Imani stepped down, and Rhea felt an unexpected pang. The girl was beautiful in burnt orange silks that matched her eyes, but she looked miserable. Shoulders tight, smile forced, staying close to her father like she was afraid to stray too far. Not the triumphant homewrecker Rhea had built in her mind, just a girl who looked trapped. "You shouldn't be watching this," Adalyn said from behind her. "Probably not. The formal dinner is in 2 hours. I need time to make you look like you belong there." "Do I belong there?" Adalyn's hand landed on her shoulder, surprisingly gentle. "You belong wherever you decide to stand. Now come on. If we're doing this, we're doing it right." The formal welcome dinner was exactly as awful as Rhea expected. She was seated near the royal table again, close enough to be seen, far enough to be dismissed. The regional alphas held court, sharing news and gossip, forming alliances and breaking others with carefully chosen words. Cassius sat at a middle table with his delegation. Rhea felt his eyes on her constantly, but she refused to look, refused to give him that. Hezekiah sat with Duke Holden and Duchess Everly, the 3 of them deep in conversation that stopped whenever servants came near. Rhea didn't need to hear them to know they were talking about her. Zane presided from the head table, playing the gracious host, but she could feel his tension through the bond. He was watching the same power plays she was, seeing the pieces moving on the board. "Quite the spectacle," murmured the alpha seated next to her, a woman named Liliana from the Eastern Territories. "The court loves drama." "I've noticed. For what it's worth, I think Holden's an ass and Hezekiah's worse." Liliana raised her glass in a subtle toast. "My money's on you surviving this." It was the first kind thing. Anyone besides, Adalyn had said to Rhea in weeks. After dinner, Shepard found her in a quiet corridor. "We need to talk." He glanced around to make sure they were alone. "Hezekiah's been meeting with Duke Holden and Duchess Everly. They're building a case to challenge your bond with the king." Rhea's stomach dropped. "On what grounds?" "Rightful mate. He's going to claim Cassius was your true mate and the bond was valid, that you manipulated the situation to break it and trap the king instead." "That's insane. The bond was corrupting. It was killing me." "I know, you know, but if they can convince the High Elder that the bond could have been saved, that you acted in bad faith," Shepard shook his head. "It gets complicated fast. Ancient pack law is messy." "What does Zane say?" "That he'll handle it, but be careful, Rhea. Hezekiah doesn't make moves he can't win." She was still processing that when she turned a corner and nearly walked straight into Cassius. They both froze. Up close, he looked worse, dark circles under his eyes, the corrupted mark spreading like ink stains across his skin, something haunted in his expression. "Rhea's eye." "Don't. Please, I need to, the mark is killing me too." "Good." The word came out cold and hard, and she watched him flinch like she'd slapped him. But then she saw it, really saw it, the suffering, the regret, the weakness that had led him to Imani in the first place. "Why did you do it?" she asked, softer. "Just tell me why." Cassius's hands clenched at his sides. "Because she was everything you weren't, confident, ambitious. She understood power and status and how to play the games you refused to play." He looked away. "And I was weak, too weak to appreciate what I had, too weak to resist what I thought I wanted. You broke our bond for her, and now you're both miserable." "Yes." Rhea should have felt vindicated, triumphant, something, but all she felt was tired. "I'm sorry," Cassius said quietly. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." "It's not worth much, but I'll take it." She walked away before he could say anything else. The powder room was mercifully empty when Rhea ducked in to collect herself. She splashed water on her face, trying to wash away the residue of seeing Cassius, when the door opened behind her. Imani stood in the doorway, hesitant. "I'll leave," Rhea started. "Wait," Imani stepped inside, closing the door. "I didn't know it would hurt you like that. The bond, I mean." Rhea turned to face her fully. "Yes, you did." "He said you too. We're practically over anyway." "We probably were." Rhea leaned against the sink. "But that's not the same as being over. You don't get to decide someone else's relationship is done just because it's convenient for you. Imani was quiet for a long moment, her burnt orange eyes downcast. My father arranged everything, the affair, breaking your bond. He said it would position our family better. She looked up, and Rhea was startled to see genuine fear there. He has plans. For tomorrow's presentation ceremony, be careful. Why are you warning me? Because I'm tired of being a piece on his game board. Imani moved to the door, then paused. And because you didn't deserve what we did to you, even if it worked out better for you in the end. She left before Rhea could respond. Rhea stared at her reflection in the mirror, the silver mate mark gleaming on her collarbone, the formal dress that still felt like a costume, the woman looking back at her who was somehow both familiar and strange. Tomorrow, Hezekiah would make his move. Tomorrow, she'd have to face whatever challenge he'd constructed. But tonight, she was still here, still standing. That would have to be enough. The throne room was designed to intimidate. Vaulted ceilings that soared 3 stories high, columns of white marble veined with gold, windows that cast shafts of light like spotlights across the polished floor, and packed wall-to-wall with nobles, alphas, dignitaries, everyone who mattered in the kingdom, all watching the doorway where Rhea was supposed to enter. Adalyn had outdone herself. The dress was midnight blue, simple but elegant, the silver mate mark on Rhea's collarbone deliberately visible. Her hair was swept up, her spine straight. She looked like she belonged. She felt like she was walking to her execution. The doors opened, and silence fell. Hundreds of eyes turned to watch her walk the length of the throne room toward where Zayn sat on the throne, wearing his crown and the weight of kingship like armor. But his silver eyes found hers immediately, and something in them steadied her. "You're not alone," they seemed to say. Rhea walked forward, each step echoing in the massive space. The High Elder stood beside the throne, ancient, gray-bearded, wearing ceremonial robes that marked him as the keeper of Pack Law. His voice carried across the silent room. "We are gathered to witness the formal acknowledgement of the mate bond between King Zayn Thorne and Rhea Barton. Let any who. I invoke right of challenge." The voice cut through the ceremony like a blade. Beta Hezekiah stepped forward from the crowd, his silver hair gleaming, expression carved from stone. The room erupted into whispers. Rhea felt her heart stop. The elder's bushy eyebrows rose. "On what grounds, Beta Hezekiah?" "This woman was mate bonded to my nephew, Cassius Mueller. She broke sacred vows through manipulation and seduced our king for personal gain." His voice rang with righteous authority. "I challenge the validity of this bond and demand investigation into her motives." The whispers grew louder. Rhea saw Duke Holden nodding, Duchess Everly whispering behind her fan, faces throughout the crowd showing exactly what they thought of her. The elder turned to Rhea. "The challenged must answer. Miss Barton, did you know Cassius Mueller was promised to another when you bonded with him?" "No." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Did you know the man you begged to mark you was the Alpha King?" "No, I knew he was my only chance to survive." "How convenient," Hezekiah said, his voice dripping with disbelief. "A dying bond, a mysterious stranger who happens to be the king." "There was nothing convenient about any of it." Rhea's voice cut through his, loud enough to carry. "Let them hear. Let them all hear. I came home early to surprise my mate for our anniversary and found him in bed with another woman. I watched my mate Mark turn black. I felt the bond corrupting, poisoning my blood. I had 3 days to live." The room had gone quiet again. "I ran. I found a healer who gave me suppressants and a list of names, wolves who might help replace a dying bond. Every single one was gone or dead." She met Hezekiah's eyes directly. "So yes, I begged a stranger in a tavern to save my life. I didn't know who he was. I didn't care. I just wanted to survive. If that makes me manipulative, then I'm guilty." "My nephew would never," Hezekiah started. "Your nephew broke our bond by betraying it." Rhea turned to where Cassius stood with the northern delegation. Tell them what you did." Cassius looked sick. The corrupted mate mark twisted across his neck like a scar. Hezekiah's hand clamped on his shoulder. "Tell them she pursued you," Hezekiah hissed. "That she was always ambitious, always looking for." No, Cassius's voice cracked. Stop, please, just stop. Cassius, my father arranged everything. The words burst out of him like a confession he'd been holding back too long. The affair with Imani, breaking Rhea's heart. He said it would strengthen our family's position, that I'd be free to marry better, that... He looked at Rhea, eyes hollow. I'm sorry. He orchestrated all of it. The throne room exploded. That's absurd, Hezekiah started, but Shepard was already stepping forward, holding a leather folio. Your Majesty, he bowed to Zane. The King's intelligence network has been investigating Beta Hezekiah for 3 months. We have letters proving he conspired with Duchess Everly to position his daughter as queen through Cassius. They plan to break Miss Barton's bond, free Cassius for a strategic marriage, and use that connection to gain influence over the crown. Shepard opened the folio, displaying letters with Hezekiah's seal. This challenge, Shepard continued, was meant to discredit Miss Barton and force the king into a politically advantageous match instead. Hezekiah's face had gone white, then red. These are forgeries. They're not. Zane's voice cut through the chaos like a knife through silk. He stood, and the room fell silent. This challenge is built on lies. He descended from the throne, every eye tracking him as he walked to where Rhea stood frozen. Rhea Barton came to me dying. I chose to help her. He stopped in front of her, close enough that only she could hear him murmur, breathe. Then louder for the room. She didn't trap me. She saved me from becoming someone who could watch an innocent person die and do nothing. His hand found hers, and the mate bond flared between them, visible to everyone watching as both their marks glowed silver. I claim this woman as my mate, not because I have to, because I choose to. The High Elder's voice rang out. The challenge is dismissed. Beta Hezekiah Harper, you are exiled from this kingdom for conspiracy against the crown. Your titles and lands are forfeit. Guards moved forward. Hezekiah opened his mouth to protest, then seemed to realize he'd already lost. They escorted him out, his rage palpable. In the chaos that followed, Cassius appeared beside Rhea. I'm sorry for all of it. She looked at him, really looked. The weak man who'd chosen comfort over courage, who was trying too late to choose better. I hope you find someone who makes you brave instead of weak, she said quietly. He nodded and walked away. Imani approached next, her burnt orange eyes bright. Thank you for not letting me become my father. What will you do? Leave court, refuse whatever marriage he arranged. She smiled, fragile but real. Choose myself for once. She walked away too, and Rhea was left standing in the throne room, Zane's hand still in hers, hundreds of witnesses watching them. Well, Zane said quietly, that was dramatic. Despite everything, Rhea laughed. Rhea woke to morning light streaming through windows that still felt too large, in a bed that still felt too soft, in rooms that were slowly starting to feel like hers. 2 weeks since the challenge, 2 weeks of the court adjusting to the reality that she wasn't going anywhere. You're awake. Adalyn bustled in with tea and that particular expression that meant she had gossip. Good, we need to get you dressed. The king requested your presence in the gardens. Requested? Well, he's the king. He doesn't technically need to request anything. But he was very polite about it. Adalyn pulled out a simple day dress. Thank the gods, no chandelier today. Also, you should know the court is placing bets on how long before you're pregnant. Rhea nearly choked on her tea. They're what? Oh yes, Duke Holden thinks within the year. Duchess Everly says 6 months. It's quite the scandal. Adalyn's eyes twinkled. I bet on twins, actually. Seemed more dramatic. You bet on, I can't with you. Someone has to keep things interesting around here. 20 minutes later, Rhea made her way to the gardens. The overgrown section had become their place, the corner where things had shifted between them, where honesty had finally broken through all the careful walls. Zane was already there, sitting on their stone bench, and he'd brought breakfast. Not a formal meal with servants and silver platters, just simple food laid out on a cloth, bread, cheese, fruit, the kind of meal you'd pack for a day in the forest. You're trying to make me cry, Rhea said. Is it working? Maybe a little. He smiled, and it transformed his face, the king becoming just Zane, the man who'd saved her life and somehow become her home. Sit, eat. The council can survive without us for an hour." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, watching morning light filter through the leaves, listening to birds argue in the branches above. No crisis, no drama, just peace. "Regret it yet?" Zane asked eventually. "Which part? Nearly dying, accidentally bonding with a king, having to learn which fork is for fish." "Being here with me." Rhea set down the apple she'd been eating and turned to face him fully. "That's the only part I don't regret." Something in his expression softened. "The council still doesn't trust you." "Do they trust you?" "Fair point," he laughed quietly. "Holden's been suspiciously quiet since the challenge. I don't trust it." "He's probably busy being bitter." Rhea leaned against Zane's shoulder, and he shifted to wrap an arm around her. "We'll figure it out, together, unless you're having second thoughts." "Not even a little." The mate bond hummed between them, steady and warm. So different from what she'd had with Cassius, that had been comfortable until it wasn't. This was fierce and real and sometimes overwhelming, but it was right in a way the old bond had never been. "I spent so long trying to be enough for someone who didn't value me," Rhea said quietly. "Making myself smaller, quieter, more convenient. I forgot to value myself." Zane's hand found hers, fingers interlacing. "And now?" "Now I'm learning." She looked up at him. "Being queen is going to be hard. The court will fight me on everything. There will be more Duke Holdens and more challenges and probably 100 other disasters waiting to happen." "Probably. But I'm choosing it anyway. Choosing you, choosing this." She touched the silver mate mark on her collarbone. "Not because fate stuck us together, but because I want to be here." "I want you here too." Zane pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Even when you stab nobles with the wrong fork." That was one time, and he deserved it. They stayed in the garden until the sun climbed higher and duty called them back. Walking through the palace together felt different now. Rhea no longer trailing behind or being escorted by guards, but walking beside Zane, hand in hand. Servants bowed, some with genuine respect, others with barely concealed resentment. Courtiers watched them pass, whispers following in their wake. Duke Holden stood in a corridor, his expression sour as lemons as they walked by. Rhea met his eyes and didn't look away. "You're getting better at that," Zane murmured. "At what?" "Not apologizing for existing." They reached the throne room where the morning petitions would begin soon. The massive space where 2 weeks ago Rhea had been publicly challenged and had stood her ground. Zane took his place on the throne, and Rhea moved to stand beside it. Not behind, not kneeling, not hidden away, beside him. "You know they'll talk," Zane said. "They always talk. You're supposed to stand behind the throne, or sit in that smaller chair over there that nobody uses." "I'm not doing either of those things." His mouth curved into a smile. "Good." The silver mate mark on Rhea's neck gleamed in the morning light streaming through the windows. Once, that mark had been a source of shame, evidence that she'd trapped a king, that she didn't belong, that she was less than everyone else in this room. Now it was evidence of survival, of choice, of refusing to die in a ditch somewhere just because it would have been more convenient for everyone else. The doors opened. Nobles began filing in for the day's business. Rhea felt their eyes on her, felt their judgment, their calculations, their resentment. And she stood there anyway. This wasn't a fairy tale ending where everything suddenly became perfect. The court would still fight her. Politics would still be treacherous. There would be more battles ahead, some she'd win and some she'd lose. But she was done apologizing for surviving. Done making herself small to fit into spaces that were never meant for her. Done believing that her worth was measured by bloodlines or titles, or whether powerful people approved of her. Zane's hand found hers briefly, a squeeze of reassurance before he had to let go to address the court. Across the mate bond, Rhea felt his steady presence, his certainty, his choice. And for the first time in her life, Rhea felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because some cosmic force had decided it, but because she'd chosen it. She'd chosen herself. And that was enough. The petitions began, and Rhea stood beside the throne, silver mark gleaming, chin high, ready for whatever came next. This wasn't an ending. This was a beginning. And she was finally enough exactly as she was.